If you have a weak heart, better leave now, because Frankenstein returns in search of a bride. You'll witness a lifetime of entertainment in 2 hours. The monster talks in Bride of Frankenstein. Tonight, the film that we watched, or rather rewatched, because of issues with our memory
And technical difficulties.
which is the theme of the channel, if you have been following us for any amount of time. The film tonight was Bride of Frankenstein. I believe it's 1935.
Sure.
We'll go with 1935. We'll probably be wrong and roasted in the comments, but we'll go with it. Tonight we watched Bride of Frankenstein in our continuing series going through the classic Universal monster movies. Welcome back to Cinema Revisited, the Universal Monsters. I am joined as per usual by my esteemed co-host, DJ. Say hi, DJ.
Hi.
So with Cinema Revisited, we go through the good, the bad, the ugly, and the iconic. So, DJ, Bride of Frankenstein, what is the good?
It's a pretty solid film.
Okay.
So, I know we're rewatching this, but going back, like, the ones that came before this were Dracula, Frankenstein, Mummy, and Invisible Man. Out of those three, Invisible Man is the most stable of them, but even it has some problems. Like, I really like that one.
Yeah.
All of them suffer from a similar problem, and that's pacing and editing.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of weird cuts, a lot of weird editing. The good of this one is it kind of is the first one in the series to pull away from that. It finally kind of gets the pacing right. Doesn't feel cut awfully. Everything flows well. There's not any weird moments of characters or scenes that just do exposition for no good reason. It just has a good flow to it.
Yes, definitely has a good flow to it.
Just solid flow.
Yep, absolutely fair. For good, I'm going to go with the cinematography. Something I don't think I noticed the first time watching it was just how good the cinematography actually is.
There's some good shots in there.
Yeah, there's some really good shots, some really iconic shots. It's not quite iconic for me, but it is very good. And kudos and props where they belong. I mean, there's a lot of movement with the camera. They're trying out different things. And I pointed out to you when we were watching this, there's actually like a whole scene where they actually do a Dutch angle. It's one of the first times I think they probably incorporated that, putting the camera to like a 45-degree angle. That's a really clever trick, and it's one that they continue to use even today in film, especially horror films, where they film everything at a 45-degree angle. Immediately puts the audience off to know that something is wrong, off kilter, and possibly sinister going on camera.
I also got the feeling too, specifically the shot they use it in, that it's showing that they're pushing against nature. Because like everything they're doing is wrong, and the angle they put it at, it looks like they're pushing the thing uphill, like the boulder. Like it's like this is futile. Like they're putting all this effort in to force against nature, and it's uneasy and it's weird and it's confusing and the angle's off, and you just feel on edge.
Yeah, that's. Yeah, like the entire scene is just beautiful. Like I said, they move the camera a bit. They actually like zoom in a little bit. Sometimes they zoom out. Sometimes they try different angles, and it's really clear that they knew what they were doing, not just in the sense of playing out the scene, but this director seems more familiar and comfortable with the idea of we can shoot the same thing multiple times so that we get multiple angles and make the scene appear better on screen. So actually playing the camera to the advantage of the fact that you have a moving perspective. A lot of films before this, in the Universal monster films, usually have a pretty wide angle. Usually you see the majority of a set, and then it zooms in on one particular person. But it's a very flat angle. It's straightforward and right on the person. There's a couple of times where they play a little with the lights and maybe going up and down. This one felt like they were more confident going to the side, changing the angle, and things like that. So kudos where it's due. The cinematography work in this is very good. What is not so good though? What is the bad? Not necessarily terrible, but bad.
For this one, man, I feel like it's a little tough because now we watched it twice, but there's some things I noticed a little bit more that I didn't notice the first time, and other things that I'm more forgiving of than I was the first time. So one of the things that actually drags on me a little bit that wasn't too bad the first time is the murder scenes right after the monster is released.
Oh yeah, yeah. The timeline is really odd.
Shows a lot of people dead, which is good character development. It's showing like the death rate and the tragedies and like the spree that the monster's giving. It doesn't really give a time frame of how long he's loose, but it makes it seem like in the form of seconds he's killed like half the town.
Yeah, like there's three people, and they're all in different locations where the monster doesn't appear.
They're all over the place. The monster starts out like in the prison, and then it shows him in the woods, and he's killed someone in his a person in his bedroom, killed a young girl outside of a school behind a gate, and then another all the people he's killed are all like in secluded cut off areas from the rest of the town in a very short amount of time. It matches the pacing of the film. It's very quick, but it's a little jarring at that moment because it would have made more sense if they found people dead throughout the street. Like he just went on, especially when they're trying to make him a tragic character later.
Yeah.
And it's like, it would be easier to make him a tragic character if he killed a few people in the street that were in his way, because people tend to attack him or run from him or cause problems.
Yeah.
But he went out of his way into people's homes and behind structures to kill people.
Yeah, it doesn't really make sense. And in fact, when we were watching it, we joked that the local town psychopaths heard the monster was loose and was like, now is my opportunity to get rid of my annoying child and my hateful wife. Like, it is odd because it's...
I do remember us talking about this last time. So part of the reason we're re-recording this is because the recording was lost. But I do remember one of our bads being the little people. And
that was my ugly.
Or was it ugly? Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that one coming up before, but in the second watch through, it does not seem as bizarre as it did the first time.
That's fair. It's something that's very different, but at the same time, it works a little bit.
I think
more.
After watching so many of these monster films, it doesn't seem so out of place. Also, his motivations make more sense. So I was actually going to put that as my bad. At least I thought that was going to be. But now I'm watching it. It just seems kind of benign. But I wanted to hit on that a little bit too, just because that one I felt strongly about originally in the first time. And in this one, it just didn't seem as... It's kind of... I thought originally it was jarring, it threw off the pacing, but after the second watch through, it's like, it actually kind of makes sense. The dude's kind of eccentric. And even though the idea is that his character is that he had a success. He created life, but the scale is wrong. It's not full size, so it seems a failure to him. And so he's almost wild about it. Was actually kind of more interesting this time around than the first time. But I just want to touch on it as a bad because I just remember that hitting really hard and not thinking it was as bad this time. What about you?
I think that's partly just because the second time around, we kind of saw it coming. We kind of see it coming. It's not shocking.
That's true.
The last time we watched this, I'd seen Bride of Frankenstein before, but it had been 2 or 3 years since I had seen it. So I had completely forgotten that there's these little people in jars. So when we saw it, the first time we recorded this, it was so off-putting just because of how shocking that is. But when you go into the film the second time, you think, oh, this is the scene where this stuff happens, and you kind of are already prepared for it. You're not necessarily focused on the visual. You can kind of hear him talk a little bit more about it, so it makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah.
That said, though, I think of all the things in the film, I still would put that as my bad. It's a great visual. They did a really great job with it. It's interesting, and yes, it kind of fits into Dr. Platoris's character, but it still is one of those things where it's just off enough that they could have done away with it. But that's partly because like the second time watching through it, I don't really have anything that I look at and I'm like, yes, that's just bad. Like, you know, that's bad. The little people kind of thing, like little people in the jars thing, just is off enough that I'm like, probably the oddest part of the film, and the part of the film that could go away.
Especially in a movie about like creating life, and this dude does it so perfectly. It's like a juxtaposition against him, because Frankenstein created the right scale, but a monstrosity, whereas he created a perfect imitation, but at a little smaller scale.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel like there's really as much crossover, if that makes sense, because they still almost perfectly replicate Frankenstein's experiments.
Dr. Pretorius almost feels like he would have made sense in his own film, like he was making little people, and that was the plot of the film, like the Puppet Master or something like that, where it's like somebody like making things in like twisted way or whatever.
Yeah, maybe something like that, but I guess it makes sense because like they wanted the Bride of Frankenstein to be a little bit more beautifully put together. Frankenstein's monster being like 1.0 is going to have his issues. He has certain things that make him look off. He's monstrous in nature, and he just looks like he was put together by cadavers. Bride of Frankenstein, on the other hand, looks pretty well put together.
Yes, a lot cleaner.
Yeah, she's a lot cleaner put together. So I guess it makes sense that Pretorius would be like, let's just take what I did, but to a fuller extent, and then using Frankenstein's idea and formula to do that. It would have been better if they explained more what Pretorius's carryover actually was into the project.
It would have made more sense if he had. This almost was like an Avengers film where like you got these characters together, but you didn't give them their own story first. Like he felt like he came from another movie, like his own movie, like The Mad Professor or something, and then they meet together. That, like, you're missing his backstory and his motivation, because his motivation is not clear. Like, I want to perfect what I have, but then he strong arms Frankenstein, and in the end, he kind of just accepts his fate pretty gracefully. Honestly, it's weird.
Yeah, it's a little bit odd.
Maybe because he did what he wanted to accomplish and he felt good. He was like, I'm done. I did what I wanted to do. Kill me. I'm glad.
Well.
He's like a fool to Frankenstein. He's like where Frankenstein came back from where he went. This guy went deeper.
That's fair. All right, let's move on to iconic.
For me,
or ugly. Sorry, it's ugly. Good, bad, ugly.
Yeah, start with the good, end with the good.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. You first. You do your ugly first. I think I need to think about it a little bit more, but I have a couple ideas.
Ugly. I'm having a hard time drawing one. Just because like we've
this
seen...
film does such a good job of fixing the problems with the other ones. Out of everyone we've watched, even including like The Invisible Man, which I really liked, and the Daughter of Frankenstein and Son of Frankenstein actually are pretty good for their own right for different reasons, but have problems. Out of every single one, I think I like this one the best. It is the one that kind of takes the best of all of them and does a really good job. It gets the pacing right. The characters are right. There's not a lot of side storying. There's not a lot of exposition. There's a good amount of consistency. The only real standout is the doctor, but even then, it's kind of intriguing in a way. Yeah. It's odd, but it's intriguing. None of it's just horribly, like, wrong. Like, even Dracula had some really weird, unnecessary moments or left stuff out that really should have been in there. The original Frankenstein had some weirdness when it came to pacing, especially when the monster got free. There's a lot of jump cutting. This one just does it right. It's hard to pick something that it fails like miserably at, especially for a time thing. And as we've moved through, we've done a few more of these since this one, so this one will come out.
Well, also this one's going to come out before the other two. So
yeah. So if we reference anything, there's going to be some videos that come out after this one. But out of all the stuff that we've watched, this one is really solid.
Yeah, this one is very solid. So I'm having a hard time finding something that's just ugly, because like
the best I can give it, if I was going to go with a time frame thing, it would be because of the sets. The sets do not match the original.
They don't match the original, but they're much better than.
But they're good. That's the problem. They're an improvement. So like the house in the first one, it's all the shots are really close. It doesn't show. In this one, it shows a big open shot of the whole house. So it's like the shots are better. The castle looks better. Like everything is an improvement upon the original. So that's not.
Yeah, this one actually feels like it's an improvement and a change. I would say maybe like.
Actually,
what's her face?
I've got one.
Okay.
Karloff as the monster in this one.
As the ugly.
The representation of the monster comes across to me as ugly. In the first one, they make it kind of clear that he's like a tragic villain. In this one, it can't keep its story straight.
Yeah,
you can't tell if I'm not talking about Karloff's acting. I'm talking about his like
just the monster.
The monster itself, the writing of him, and the way he carries on. He'll walk up and randomly murder a person, and then he's trying to be a friend to someone else. And he says later on, "Oh, she hates me," to the bride. She hates me like all the others. It's like, okay, but you've also just straight up killed a bunch of people on purpose too.
Yeah,
it's never clear exactly if he's supposed to be like the trailers, even like in all the briefing up to the film makes it look like it's a monster film. And I think that's a time problem. It can't commit to the tragic hero because it's trying to be a horror and shocking film. So it's just trying to shock the audience, but it's trying to give a deeper meaning in there, but it fails to do it because, well, we want to see the monster slain. It's like they watched the first one and people cheered when the monster was slain. So in this one, no matter how tragic they made him, they had to make sure they killed him in the end. So they had to make him a bad guy.
Yeah, that could be it.
And it has a tragic. It's just it keeps it. It's flipping like this. The whole film. Is he? Isn't he? Is he? Isn't he? It's just difficult to follow.
That's fair. I'm gonna continue down this train to be my ugly as well, because now that you kind of pointed it out, this film just has a hard time picking a lane when it comes to tone.
Yes,
because
the pacing is good. The tone is weird.
The tone is weird because if you view the film as a comedy, there's a lot of stuff that makes sense. The one, the female character that carried over from Invisible Man, where she plays almost the exact same character, loud, obnoxious, but supposed to be kind of the comic relief. If you view it as a comedy, she makes sense. But she doesn't carry on for the majority of the film. So when she's in, it's supposed to be a comedy.
It does have somewhat of a happy ending, so you could consider it a comedy.
Yeah, you could consider
it's
kind
not
of a comedy.
Truly a tragedy. It depends on who you see as the lead. If Dr. Frankenstein is the lead, it's a comedy. If the monster is the lead, it's a tragedy.
I would say that if Dr. Frankenstein's the lead, it's a horror.
Well, it is a horror, but it's also but it's still a comedy.
Well, it obviously like
it has a positive,
but,
overreaching. It's a comedy. It has a happy ending. He gets the girl. Everything works out for him. Whereas for the Frankenstein's monster, if he's the main lead, it's a tragedy because he sacrifices himself for the others.
Yeah.
Which is still, I don't know. It's odd.
It is odd because there's times when this film, like I said, the tone kind of fits like a comedy. The beginning of the film kind of feels like a comedy. And then it switches to a drama of sorts with Frankenstein and his existential crisis and with the introduction of Dr. Platoris, and it becomes like a psychological, philosophical drama. Then when it's with Dr. Platoris and the majority of his scenes, it's a macabre comedy. It's like it's a dark humored comedy.
You know what it comes across to me as? A dark carnival.
Carnival?
A dark carnival.
Okay.
Like at a carnival you have like the clowns and it's like all goofy and silly. But think about a dark carnival where the clowns are like wielding machetes and juggling chainsaws and lighting things on fire.
Yeah.
It's like it's a silly premise, but they're doing dark. The deeds, like the actions, are dark. That's kind of
exactly.
how Frankenstein comes across.
Yeah.
Is the premise is kind of silly, but it's done in such a dark and menacing way. It's yes, it has a trouble following, which either one is fine, but it doesn't pick a lane. It swaps between them.
Yeah, exactly.
The
And
first
it's a
one
major-
sticks pretty strongly to the tragedy. Like, you don't know at the end if Frankenstein's even alive, for one. The monster is an absolute curse, and it's dark, and it's meant to be like, the monster is kind of confused, and it's like accidental killings, but unpurposeful depending on the situation. But it's like he's
Well, it's
like flipping.
purposeful against like things that are actively
Yes,
hostile
and
to
this
him.
one he just plain straight murders people with
Prompting.
reckless abandon.
Yeah.
And that's a tone shift from the first one, but also from itself, because it kind of establishes him again as tragic, and then it's like, oh, but he actually is just a killer. And it's like they don't want the audience to like the monster too much. Like, he is the villain, remember, he's the bad guy. It's like, is he though? It's confusing sometimes what they want you to get out of it. Now, that's to be said, people can get out of it whatever they want, but there is a presenting narrative, right? When you're making a film, you want to present it with a clear protagonist and antagonist. The audience can take to who they want, right? They say, like a lot of audience commiserated with Thanos, right? It's like, okay, maybe he has a point. Okay, but he's clearly the bad guy.
Yeah.
Even if you take a point to him, he's clearly the villain here. The problem with this is it doesn't clear cut whether Frankenstein is a villain or just a force of nature, or if he's meant to be. It's just, it confuses what it wants. Whereas the first one gave a really good, clear understanding of that.
Yeah.
At least in comparison to this one, it did.
Yeah. I'd just say tone, kind of an ugly. It needs to be clear on what it wants to be.
Yes.
Okay, iconic.
Okay, for me, I'm going to say the score. I know I stole it from you.
Stole mine. I don't remember what yours was last time, but yeah, okay, go on.
The score. This you mentioned a thing, and this is true, and I've listed all the other ones too, that we watched. This is the first one that has a consistent score throughout the entire film. Dracula, Invisible Man all have long points of silent parts in the film where they're just talking and there's no score. This one has a score throughout the entire film. And it changes the tone quite a little bit overall. And actually, I think a little bit gives to part of the problem, is that it's iconic having the score all throughout, but sometimes the score doesn't match what's happening. There's a few moments where like something dreadful's happening and the score seems kind of lighthearted and vice versa.
Well, yeah, like it's in a major key. It's a little whimsical sounding.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like when they're creating, when they brings the device down to create the Bride of Frankenstein, it's playing a major key, and it's really, it's like enchanting and positive and uplifting. I was like, they're about to do the same mistake they already make. Why is this uplifting?
Right, even if it like plays,
Because it wasn't all the way to that point. It was like all dark and dreary, and then it's like really grand. I think it was meant to say he's gonna do it, but well, it's not at the point where it's the she's alive part. That's back to the grim music again. It's just randomly when he's about to turn the machine on, it gets bright and happy, and I was like, what the frick is that? That was really weird. But the fact that it has a score throughout is a game changer in the way that it sounds and feels.
and it feels like a score that was put together specifically for the film.
Correct.
The first Frankenstein, but also Dracula and Mummy used the exact same song, which isn't made
The
for
exact
Dracula.
same music, yep.
And it's a, I think it was a Mozart piece actually between the two of them. I think. Yeah.
Yeah, they used that one. Yep.
Yeah, it's the exact same one. And then Frankenstein has, I don't think Frankenstein actually has any music. They open up on the stage.
There's music when it opens up, and there's a few score points, but it's not consistent.
Yeah, it's not consistent. And then the Mummy doesn't really have anything.
No.
Invisible Man has it at the beginning and the end. For the most part, it's pretty.
Yeah, it's less of Dracula is literally silent throughout the entire. There's no background music like the entire film. It's just people acting and doing stuff. Same thing with Frankenstein. There's like very few moments of music throughout. And then Invisible Man had like some pieces here and there, and the Mummy did, but it wasn't until this one that it really like.
Yeah, this one's
up.
like fully orchestrated.
Okay, so what about you? Now that I stole yours.
Now that you stole mine, I have to think of a different one.
Well, another one that I thought of was the Bride of Frankenstein. Like you mentioned this when we were watching it.
Yeah, well, it's an iconic shot. She's an iconic character in and of herself. She plays it really well. I think she was my good.
It's a little different than Frankenstein, where he's like really stiff and jerky. She's really energetic. Like she's squirrely. She's like where Frank was like really slow and like had purpose for his movements, and he'd like do this and then he'd move and then he'd do this. She's like
yeah, she seems like she's taking everything in and is overwhelmed.
yes.
Frankenstein, when he comes to life, it's like he's waking up from a long sleep.
Yeah.
So he's more groggy and he's not able to like process. It seems like her brain is more alive, so it's more shocked that it's where it is. She's more put together as well. She actually has like her own vocal cords and things like that, and she screams at the monster. I think that probably that scene is iconic, just because I'll go with that. The actual reveal of the Bride of Frankenstein and the way that the Bride of Frankenstein reacts to Frankenstein in and of itself is iconic.
That was
because because if you think about it, the entire movie we're leading up to this idea, and Dr. Platoris, a professor of philosophy, yada yada yada, is under the impression that to calm the monster of Frankenstein, he needs a friend. He needs a mate.
Mm-hmm.
He needs another.
He keeps talking about both man and female. He created he them. Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
He needs an Eve to his Adam. Like he keeps talking about this. Like it's like an excessive point, which tags on really well to the playing God of the original.
Yeah. But so it's kind of almost assumed that because Frankenstein, when he hears about this, is excited. He's interested in this. Yes. A friend, a wife, somebody to be with, a woman, like that's like he's excited about it. He's trying to get it done. Dr. Frankenstein is doing all of the experiments and things like that, and Platoris has like convinced him. So us as the audience, we go into it thinking, oh, Frankenstein's monster, the Bride of Frankenstein, will be similar to Frankenstein's monster, and either it's going to be really tragic, or they're going to have an instant connection and it'll mellow him out.
Right.
But when she is brought to life, she is different than Frankenstein, like through and through. Her reaction is different. She's looking around. She's overwhelmed. All these things.
And when she sees him, she screams.
Yes. And she follows Dr. Frankenstein around. Not Frankenstein's monster. She follows him around and he directs her, and the other thing is like he treats her differently than he ever did the monster.
He treats her with like care and carefulness, whereas with him he basically just forgot him after he made him because he didn't know what to do with him after he created him.
Yeah, but we don't expect the reaction that we get from the Bride of Frankenstein to Frankenstein. She screams, and it's not like a monstrous scream. It's a terrified scream of pure terror.
Mm-hmm.
And then her final reaction to him killing them both. Frankenstein's monster killing them both. All three of them, actually. But her final reaction to Frankenstein, even when he's tried to be, no, we're the same. I'm not going to hurt you. She hates me. He's bummed. Instead of her having like any kind of empathy or change in character, she hisses at him.
Yep.
So I would say that's iconic because it subverts expectations in a good way.
Yep. And it's very animalistic in a different way as well. He showed very animalistic behavior when she was first created. So did she, but a different kind. It was nervousness, like prey. He came to life like a predator. She came to life like prey, like a scared deer that was concerned for her safety.
Yeah.
But hissed and like curled, like, hey, I might be afraid of you, but I'm not gonna,
Yeah. Like she actually hates him.
Yeah.
She's not just scared of him, she actively hates him.
Yep.
So I would say that's iconic, subversion of expectations, things like that. Obviously, Karloff in and of himself, we can talk about that iconicness. Yes, his character is bad-ish with the story, where things move around and are kind of off, but Karloff in and of himself plays the character very well.
Yes.
Very believable. He has the monstrous voice. He has the actions and the mannerisms, and it carries over really well from the first film. It's 100% believable that this is, in fact, a direct sequel.
The bad is what they do with his character. The iconic is how he presents it.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last two things that we always talk about is cleaning it up for the time and recreating it for a modern audience. As far as cleaning up for the time, I'd probably just leave it the heck alone.
You could.
There's scenes we talked about that were bad would fix, but I feel like for the time period it was built, if you touch anything, you're liable to make it worse than better. But if I was gonna nitpick, I would pick a lane for your tone. Either make him the straight monster that you want him to be, or make him a tragic character. You can still have him kill in the end. You can have it in the same way, but you gotta be clear as to, you can't just have him randomly murdering people just because. You have to give a reason. You have to show him interacting with those people and accidentally killing them or them interacting. When you just have them dead, especially when he has to go out of their way to run into them, it makes him look like a killer. And then the little people thing, either give a little bit more backstory to that, like who this guy is, give more to it, or just leave him out entirely.
Yes.
Like you can easily like have him. His research is incomplete, and he needs Frankenstein to help him finish it, and he uses the Adam and Eve thing to convince him, whereas he's actually literally perfected life already, and he just needs a little bit of help to get it all the way done. Yeah, that was just
the other thing is the fact that he actually made them all little characters was weird. I would just have them like, I made a man and a woman, but they don't get along.
Well, or if you just stopped with the king and the queen, like I made a man and a woman, and they're a king and a queen for my entertainment. But then you're just kept adding characters, and they just kind of are like accepting of their fate in their jars. It's a very oddity, like the way that still hit me a little bit. The way the characters act, the amount of them. He made so many of them, and the weirdness of them. King, queen, okay. Bishop, okay,
devil,
but then
mermaid,
devil, but then mermaid, ballerina, yeah. It's like a weird mix of. He's like, well, we don't know how they're gonna come out. Well, the first three came out as like a set, so I don't know why all of a sudden the set got broke. What did you do differently?
And then like the weird thing was that she likes dancing to a particular song and only one particular song, and then he made a mermaid.
And he's describing these characters and their backstories and their characteristics, and it's never mentioned again. It's just a weird. It kind of shows his maniacal kind of character, like his weirdness and his quirkiness, but it doesn't really help us understand him any better. Just that he's weird.
That he's weird and that he can do certain things. So I would go ahead. I would clean up that scene. I would kind of cut out maybe the little people. Have it be more like maybe he shows one or two.
Even one.
He's like, I can replicate my research, but I have yet to be able to make it larger. Something like that. Clean it up. It doesn't have to go as long. The other thing is like be clear with the timeline, because the thing is that the murders that we are like don't really make sense. Maybe it wasn't actually Frankenstein's monster. Maybe it was Platoris with his research, and he was killing people for the body parts.
So that would have been really interesting too, and that's something for the modern one, that's what I would do.
Yeah.
For the modern one, I'd make it a red herring. For the old one, just clean it up and make it clearer.
Yeah, so like that's kind of the things that just need to be cleaned up and things like that. And yes, pick the tone. Either make it a dark comedy with the humor bits, or make it a dark tragedy. You can't have both or all three if you add a like
It's
philosophical
very confusing,
question. Yeah.
the tone until the end. It's like, oh, it's just another monster film. Why was it not that clear throughout the film?
Yeah, and why is it that this film, for some reason, had such a hard time picking the tone when we've had 4 films previously that all had a very consistent tone? These are horror, dark, mysterious horror, and there's some bits of humor. Like Invisible Man has bits of humor, but that's because he is monstrous, but he's also insane. So his instability makes him humorous. Because he literally says nonsense. The moon fears me, blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
With this one, you need to actually be like, okay, do we go with the humor or do we go with... So, pick the tone. Modern.
Okay, so the biggest change that I would make for modern is exactly what you talked about the other ones. I would make the murders a red herring. So I would make this movie a tragic loss where you take the movie as is, right? Frankenstein is like found. They think he's dead. They take him back home, find out he's alive. That all can stay the same. The shift is like when he's sitting there like all in his stupor and stuff. He's like suffering, or whether or not his work is really good. And then you show him inspiring other people to mimic his work. Other people, you see other experiments like failing, other people trying to work, and you get the doctor guy like almost gets it. He creates the little person, and he's like, I've done it. I'm so close, but and you don't even have to show it. It's like, I've done it. I'm so close, but there's something, it's just not quite right. And then you show him introducing to him. That would be a fun, different. Give him more backstory, because you want to set him up to be a villain. And all the murders that people think are the monster, because you have the monster get out like he does. He escapes, kills the man and the wife on accident trying to escape. But you don't make it clear it's accidental. You make it look like you can still not sure. And then it shows all the murders throughout the town, and it's actually, and you're like, oh my gosh, Frankenstein, he is the monster. He's just killing people left and right, and you leave it like that, like he's killing everybody. And then they capture him and put him in the jail, and he stays there for a while.
That's true.
He doesn't immediately get out. He's there for a while. People get to see him. People find he's real. He gets ridiculed. There's realness to it, stakes. And while he's there, the murders stop. And so you're like, oh no, yeah, it was him. And you have the doctor guy meet with Frankenstein like he does. And then when Frankenstein does finally get out, the murders continue again, and it's so it's convinced, but it's actually Platoris is the one killing everybody because he needs organs and stuff for his experiments. So he's killing everybody, and he's using the monster as cover, and he's actually aware the monster's free this whole time. Like that's the twist. And when towards the end, you find out that he was behind it all, and he knew it the entire time, and the monster sacrifices himself to take out the villain in himself because he doesn't feel like he belongs. People fear him, and the monster needs to go as well. That'd be my points. What about you? There's a lot I've left out there. Those are my main points that I would like to change. The rest of it could stay mostly the same, but modernized in its tone and its production. But
yeah, I agree with you. I think that having Latour show up more like a twist. Like he's definitely dark and twisted in some way. He's off. You do scenes where he's talking to Frankenstein and maybe he doesn't seem to be getting at the full extent of what he's trying to get to. Maybe you have a couple of scenes where he shows up in like an odd place.
Well, even in this one, there's all these scenes that make him look like the maniacal villain and the clever villain. When he has the guy go get a body for him, and then it's like, it was very fresh. He's like, where did you get it? And he's like, lied in.
Yeah.
Like he's manipulative and maniacal in this, but like and then he just gives up in the end. There's no twist or clever like he was behind it all the whole time, which you almost feel like was the point, because he's controlling everything, including the monster.
True, he's manipulating the monster. Yeah, I would just take time to establish him as a character, and probably in the end have it to be where he doesn't just stand there and take his fate. Maybe something happens.
Yeah,
to
that
him
was
after.
odd, because he's like
Yeah.
he's sitting here like his life work, and he talks about how much it means to him, and he finally accomplishes it, and then immediately just lets himself die. Like, I've done my work, I'm done, I don't need it anymore.
Oh yeah, and it's like, yeah,
So
Frankenstein's
unceremonious.
yeah, and Frankenstein's like, no, you stay, but there's no reason that he couldn't attempt to flee
Right.
or something.
Or even like, my work's not finished. And he's done. He just stands there and is like, okay. He's like, you died. And he's like, okay, cool, bro. Let's die together. Like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah, that doesn't really make the most sense. I liked that they try to make Frankenstein more like regretful of all the things. He has a bit of a character shift when he starts getting really into it, but he is held captive at the end. I like that, where it's like he's kind of doing it against his will, but he's interested enough.
It makes it clear earlier in the film that he's on the fence of whether or not he should continue. And when he's forced to do it, it's almost like he's forced to do it, but at the same time, he really wants to.
Yeah,
It's like getting forced to do something you already want to do. It's like you were on the fence, but now you're being forced to do it, so you're still not kind of sure, but at the same time, it's what you want. That was really interesting. I'd keep that. Like,
well, yeah, no,
when he
like,
gets
I'm just
put
saying,
in
like,
under duress, like he originally he's under duress, but then he like really gets into it, and he becomes his obsession comes back, and the life comes back to him. But then once he accomplishes it, the horror makes him realize that what have I done? I've already done this once. Why am I doing this? I need to stop. Which is kind of what happens, but maybe clearer, because he, she, like you said earlier, she hides behind him, and he kind of protects her a little bit and kind of takes her under, treats her very differently than he treated her. And at the end there, Frankenstein kind of shows like remorse, like, hey, go, you go, be free. You're my father, you created me, but I shouldn't exist. I think would have a lot more heartfeltness to it if he wasn't behind all the murders.
Yeah.
Some of them. You can have him kill some of them, but it's all of his murders or all of his kills are in self-defense or accidental,
or
because he just
circumstance,
doesn't know his own strength. He's a superhuman being. Doesn't understand. He doesn't mean to. It's an accident.
Yeah.
And so he's just trying to live his life, and he just doesn't understand the consequences of his actions or the full stakes involved. And at the end, he kind of realizes that and sacrifices himself. And that leaves it open. You can have more in sequels in the future where if he comes back, he can be more of a tragic character that gains a place rather than he's just constantly the gag and the monster.
Yeah, I would just, it's just a thing of like cleaning up and modernizing different things. There's really not much in regards to this film. It works very well within itself. Yes, a lot of people really like the character of the Bride of Frankenstein, but I don't think she appears in any other films other than this one.
No, I don't know.
So
Okay, I don't want to mention it too much. We have watched a little further than this, but we did watch Son of Frankenstein. I don't want to talk to it too much. We'll talk about it later, but she doesn't show up in that one, and she's not in the trailers for any of the other ones either.
yeah, I don't
I
think she
watched
shows
through a
up
lot
in
of the
other
trailers,
ones.
and like she's not shown or mentioned at all in any of them. So I don't know that she ever shows up again, which is kind of interesting because in a lot of the media where they show Frankenstein and the Bride of Frankenstein as like a couple,
Yeah.
like it's taken from like that one, but it's like the only scene they're ever together in the Universal films. It's antagonistical and it's
Yeah,
tragic, and it's
she hates him.
and then like in everything, like shows like Hotel Transylvania or the Munsters or things like that,
Yeah.
show them happily together, and it's like, where does that come from? Like, I wonder if that was a twist on the trope, like, oh, but there's probably also later films that were done, because I know Universal redoes a lot of their films in the 60s. They go back and do a lot of them again, and bring back some of these characters. So they've been done many, many times. So I'm curious to see how that comes out. So
Yeah, I am too. So it is one of those things where there's very little that you can do.
we're really watching.
Yeah.
We're watching history in the making, because this is like, we know all the tropes and characters that these have from like more modern stuff, and what we know from what we've heard from things.
Right.
So characters like Dracula and Frankenstein, and even like side characters like Igor and Bride of Frankenstein and the Blob and these other things, they come. Which one became the iconic version that we know today is interesting to me, because Karloff's Frankenstein kind of feels like what we know of the modern Frankenstein.
Yeah, a little bit. But most of
Bela
the tropes
Lugosi's
and
Dracula
stuff,
even pulls through.
Yeah.
But the Bride of Frankenstein didn't. Igor's a character doesn't show up until a later film, and is always the assistant of Frankenstein. You know, it's like, it's interesting in more modern films. It's just interesting how these characters evolve and change. I'm interested to see at what point some of these characters become the modern iterations of those characters we know today.
Yeah.
Because some of them we've already seen. But like Bride of Frankenstein, we've not seen the modern take of her yet. We've not seen the modern take of Igor. We've not seen the modern take of oh gosh, what is it? Not Dracula, but his assistant, Renfield. A lot of these characters change over time. Like Renfield is very cowardly in the first film, but in the ones that I remember later on, he's a little more clever.
Yeah.
I remember him being clever, afraid of Dracula, but clever.
Yeah.
And in that one, he was just constantly afraid. So, and that's what I'm waiting for, is to see these characters evolve and change, and see some of the more modern aspects that we know of these characters come up.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, I think we've covered everything. We went through the good, the bad, the ugly, and the iconic. We talked a little bit about how to clean it up in the time, and how we would kind of try to modernize it if we were given the task of doing that for the specific film. So yeah, we've done everything we have set out to accomplish. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Cinema Revisited. Let us know your thoughts. What would you do if you had to modernize this film, or what are your thoughts in general regarding The Bride of Frankenstein in the comments? If you like this video, be sure to let us know by leaving us a like. Those are always encouraging and always helpful. What else would be helpful is if you haven't already, please subscribe and ring the bell so that you do not miss any of our upcoming videos and series. Otherwise, share us with your friends. We are a growing community, and we cannot grow if you do not help us. We have extended all of our small friend groups. But anyway, we always appreciate you guys. If you want more articles and things like that, be sure to check out our Facebook page at Entertainment Rebooted. Otherwise, we will see you guys in the next video.
Thanks for watching.